There is a particular kind of question that does not arrive quietly. It lands in a room the way a dropped weight lands on a gymnasium floor, not with violence, but with a resonance that moves through everything around it, and does not stop moving until every person present has felt it in their chest. In the spring of 1985, at a promotional event held inside the Mandarin Oriental Hotel in Hong Kong, a room that seated 240 journalists, photographers, studio executives and martial artists from 4 countries, a single question was put to a man who had never in 11 years of public life given a simple answer to anything. The question was this: could he beat Chuck Norris in a real fight? The man being asked was Jackie Chan. He was 31 years old. He stood 5 feet 9. He weighed 154 pounds at the time of the event, according to the hotel's medical staff who had conducted a routine production physical 2 days prior. He had been working in Hong Kong cinema since the age of 17. He had broken his nose 4 times, his ankle twice, his cheekbone once, and the base of his skull in a stunt gone wrong in Yugoslavia the previous autumn. He had performed every stunt in every film he had ever made. Not most of them. Every single one. He had trained under Master Yu Jim Yuan beginning at the age of 6, inside the China Drama Academy in Hong Kong, where the training schedule ran from 5 in the morning until midnight, and where failure to complete a movement correctly meant physical punishment administered without sentiment. He had lived inside that school for a decade. He had not chosen to be there. He had been placed there by his parents when they left for Australia and could not take him. He had learned, inside those 10 years, that the body was not a limitation, it was a language. By 1985, Jackie Chan had made 31 films. He had directed, he had choreographed, he had composed music for his own productions. He had built a stunt team, trained them himself, and refused to insure any of them because the insurance companies had told him the work he was asking them to do could not be done safely, and he had decided to do it anyway. The question about Chuck Norris was not a friendly question. It came from a journalist in the 3rd row who had spent 7 years covering the martial arts film industry, and who understood exactly what he was doing when he asked it. He was placing Jackie Chan inside a comparison that had no clean exit. Chuck Norris was not a film legend in the way Jackie Chan was a film legend. Chuck Norris was something else entirely. He was the thing that existed before the films. The films had only documented it. In the next 11 minutes of that press conference, what Jackie Chan said, and what he chose not to say, would move through the martial arts world for decades. Not because of the words themselves, because of what the words revealed about the man being asked. Nobody in that room understood yet what they were about to hear. Stay with this until the end. What Jackie Chan said from that chair in the Mandarin Oriental would become one of the most repeated and least understood moments in the history of martial arts cinema. The journalist who asked the question was named Raymond Fong. He was 42 years old, had a press credential from a publication with a circulation of 80,000, and he leaned forward in his chair as he delivered it because he had rehearsed the question the night before in his hotel room. He had not rehearsed it because he thought it would embarrass Jackie Chan. He had rehearsed it because he understood that the answer, whatever it was, would be the headline. He was not wrong. Before the question arrived, the room had been moving at the pace these rooms always moved. Studio representatives speaking about production timelines, translators pausing the rhythm of every exchange by 3 seconds, photographers adjusting equipment in the aisles. The kind of organized noise that precedes a thing without knowing it is preceding a thing. Jackie Chan had been seated at the long table at the front of the room for 40 minutes. He had answered questions about his upcoming film. He had answered questions about his stunt philosophy. He had answered a question about whether he would ever work in Hollywood, and he had smiled at that one in a way that did not commit to anything. He was comfortable in rooms like this the way men who have survived truly difficult things are comfortable in rooms that are merely difficult. Raymond Fong raised his hand. He was called upon. He stood. He did not clear his throat. He said, "Could Jackie Chan beat Chuck Norris in a real fight?" The room changed. Not loudly, the photographers did not lower their cameras. The translators did not stop working. But something in the air of the room reorganized itself in the 3 seconds after the question landed, and every person in those 240 seats felt it happen. Jackie Chan looked at Raymond Fong for a moment. Not with irritation. Not with amusement. He looked at him the way a craftsman looks at a material he is deciding how to work with. Then he said something that nobody in that room had expected him to say. He said, "That is the wrong question." If you have found this story and you want to hear what came after that sentence, make sure you are subscribed and drop a comment below telling us where in the world you are watching from. Stories like this one do not find their way to people by accident. Raymond Fong remained standing. His pen was in his hand, but he had not written anything yet. He said, "Could you explain what you mean?" Jackie Chan set both hands flat on the table in front of him. This was a specific gesture, not a surrender gesture, not a thinking gesture. It was the gesture of a man preparing to say something he has thought about for a very long time and has never before said in public. He said, "People ask if I can beat Chuck Norris. They ask it like it is a question about fighting. It is not a question about fighting. It is a question about understanding. And the answer to it requires me to tell you something about Chuck Norris that I do not think most people in this room know." The room was completely still now. A single camera shutter clicked somewhere in the back. The sound of it was very loud. Jackie Chan had met Chuck Norris once, briefly in Los Angeles in 1979, at an event connected to a production neither of them was centrally involved in. He had watched Norris move across a room. He had not spoken to him that day, but he had watched him, with the kind of attention that a man trained from childhood to read bodies gives to a body worth reading. What he had seen in 1979 had stayed with him for 6 years. He began to tell the room what he had seen. Chuck Norris, Jackie Chan said, does not move like a man who has trained to fight. He moves like a man for whom fighting has become so deeply internal that the distinction between the trained movement and the natural movement no longer exists.
He said, "I have been in this industry since I was 17 years old. I have worked with some of the finest martial artists in the world. Some of them are in this building today. And I have learned to see the difference between a man who knows how to fight and a man who has become something that fighting cannot fully describe." A journalist in the 5th row shifted in his seat.
The sound of it was audible. Jackie Chan was not finished. He said, "Chuck Norris was the world middleweight karate champion, not once, 6 consecutive times, between 1968 and 1974. He did not win those titles in the way that champions sometimes win titles, by finding a weakness in a system, by becoming expert in a narrow category of technique. He won them by being, in every honest assessment, the finest full-contact competitor of his generation. This is not a reputation that was given to him, it was taken from every other man in the bracket." He paused. He said, and then he stopped competing. He let that sit. In the martial arts world, the decision to retire from competition at the height of one's power carries a specific weight. It is not the weight of defeat, it is heavier than that. A man who retires at the peak of his ability removes himself from the system of verification that competition provides, and the world never fully learns what the ceiling of his ability might have been. Chuck Norris had retired in 1974 at 34 years old, undefeated in his final seasons of competition. The ceiling was never located. Jackie Chan said, "When I watched him move across that room in Los Angeles, I was not watching a retired champion. I was watching a man whose body had absorbed 47,000 hours of training, and had reorganized itself around that absorption. You do not see that often. I have seen it in perhaps 5 or 6 men in my life. The movement is different at that level."
It is not about speed or power anymore. Those things exist, but they are not the point. The point is economy. The point is the complete removal of everything that is not necessary. When Chuck Norris moves, there is nothing in the movement that should not be there.
The room was silent in the particular way that rooms become silent when the people in them understand that they are receiving something that will not be available a second time. Raymond Fong had put his pen down. He was not writing, he was listening. Jackie Chan leaned forward slightly in his chair. He said, You want me to tell you if I could beat him? I will tell you this instead. A fight is not a comparison of techniques. A fight is a conversation about distance and timing, conducted at a speed that does not allow for reconsideration. The man who controls the distance controls the conversation. The man who controls the conversation controls the outcome. He said, in 6 years of watching competition footage.
In 6 years of studying the way Chuck Norris conducted that conversation, I have not found a moment in which his management of distance was imprecise. Not one moment. I have looked for it. I am telling you, I have looked for it deliberately because I wanted to find it, and it is not there. He sat back. He said, so when you ask me if I could beat Chuck Norris,
what I hear is, could I find an imprecision that does not appear to exist, at a speed that does not allow for deliberation, in a domain where he has been operating longer than I have been a professional? He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, that is not a question I can answer yes to with any integrity. The room broke open. Not in the way rooms break open at a scandal, and the way rooms break open when something true has been said inside them. 47 people began speaking at once. 3 photographers repositioned themselves in the aisle. The studio executive in the second row, a man named Gerald Wu who had been producing martial arts films for 19 years, put both hands over his mouth and kept them there. Raymond Fong was still standing. He had not sat down. He said some people would call that an admission of defeat. Jackie Chan looked at him. He said some people would. Those people have never competed at a level where honesty about your opponent's ability is a survival skill. The men who underestimated Chuck Norris did not do it a second time. He paused for exactly 3 seconds. He said, I intend to do it 0 times. A fighter's life is not measured by the battles he seeks. It is measured by the clarity with which he sees what is in front of him. A man who approaches what he does not understand with the assumption that he understands, it has already lost the most important exchange of the encounter. What happened in the minutes that followed Raymond Fong's question was not, in the conventional sense, a confrontation. There were no strikes. There was no physical contact. There was no moment that could be captured by a split-second photograph and used as a thumbnail. But something was decided in that room, something was settled, and the settling of it moved through the martial arts world in the way that genuine clarity always moves, quietly at first and then permanently. 3 people in that room recorded what Jackie Chan said in sufficient detail to carry it forward accurately. Raymond Fong himself, who would publish a version of it in his next column, a Hong Kong stunt coordinator named Thomas Yin, who had been invited to the event by the studio, and who wrote down Jackie Chan's words in a small notebook that evening in his hotel room, because he understood their value. And a young American film student named David Carver, who had attended the event as an observer for his thesis project on Hong Kong cinema, and who would include a transcript of the exchange in a documentary he completed 2 years later. Thomas Yin told the story inside his stunt community for the next 20 years. He told it accurately because he had written it down correctly that evening. He told it to men who went on to train other men, and the story traveled through that lineage with the precision of a thing that had been set down in writing at its source. David Carver's documentary was seen by a modest audience when it was completed in 1987, but the segment containing Jackie Chan's press conference remarks was excerpted and redistributed several times over the following decade. And each redistribution added a layer of interpretation that the original words had not carried. By the mid-1990s, some versions of the story had Jackie Chan laughing when he said it. He had not laughed. By the early 2000s, some versions had Chuck Norris himself present in the room. He had not been present. The room held 240 people and Chuck Norris was not one of them. Raymond Fong retired from journalism in 1998. In a long interview conducted the year before his retirement, he was asked about the most memorable press conference of his career. He named the Mandarin Oriental event without hesitation. He said, I went in there trying to embarrass Jackie Chan with a question about Chuck Norris. I left the room having heard one of the most honest assessments of another martial artist that I have encountered in 30 years of covering this industry. He said, Jackie Chan did not answer the question I asked. He answered the question I should have asked. And the answer was better than anything I would have thought to ask for. What he had answered was this: in a domain defined by physical resolution, Honesty about the limits of one's own ability against a specific opponent is not weakness. It is the most sophisticated form of technical intelligence available. The men who have trained longest and hardest do not lose track of what they do not know. They lose track of what they once assumed. Those are different losses, and only one of them makes you dangerous. Chuck Norris was told about the press conference exchange in the months following the event. He was informed by a journalist who had read Raymond Fong's column and wanted a response. Chuck Norris listened to the summary of what Jackie Chan had said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said two things. He said, "Jackie Chan is one of the most extraordinary physical talents I have encountered in my professional life." And then he said he was right not to answer yes. He said nothing else on the subject. Both men continued working. Jackie Chan went on to complete a career that would span 5 more decades. Chuck Norris continued the work he had always done. In film, and in the transmission of his martial knowledge to the generations of practitioners who had sought him out. Their paths crossed twice more after 1985, at industry events, with the ordinary politeness of men who hold each other in genuine regard, and have no territory in dispute. The question Raymond Fong asked in that Hong Kong hotel room in the spring of 1985 was never answered in the way it was intended to be answered. It produced something more durable than an answer. It produced a moment of public clarity from a man who had built his entire professional life on the refusal to pretend that difficulty was not difficult. In a world that rewards the performance of certainty, Jackie Chan's admission was a specific kind of courage, not the kind that moves toward a threat without knowing its dimensions. The kind that looks at a thing clearly, measures it with all the instruments available, and reports what it finds without modification for the comfort of the audience. The story he told about Chuck Norris was also, without his saying so, a story about what it means to have built something real. Chuck Norris had not built a reputation, he had built a record. And records, unlike reputations, are not diminished by silence. They do not require maintenance. They stand in the places where they were built, and they do not move, and they do not reduce regardless of how much time accumulates around them. Jackie Chan understood that. He said it the only way it could be said honestly. He said, "I have looked for the imprecision. It is not there. The measure of a man is not what he claims at full volume in rooms designed for claiming. It is what he says quietly in rooms where saying the true thing costs him something." Jackie Chan paid a price in that room at the Mandarin Oriental in 1985. He paid it in the currency of competitive pride, which is not cheap in any industry and is least cheap in the martial arts world. He paid it voluntarily, he paid it without being asked to. And what he received in return was something that cannot be manufactured, and cannot be faked, and cannot be taken away. A reputation among the men who understood what he had said, foreseeing, with precision, and without self-protection, exactly what was in front of him. That is rarer than the ability to fight. The ability to fight is teachable. The willingness to see clearly is a different matter entirely. Next week we will tell the story of the night Bruce Lee walked into a private training session that Chuck Norris was running for a select group of American instructors in 1969. And what was said between them when the room was finally cleared and the two men were left alone. That story has been carried for 50 years by the 3 people who were still present when it happened, and we have tracked all 3 of them down. If you want to be there when that story is told, you know what to do.